Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the WCW Saturday Night Review Series. Yes, new series. We have not abandoned Smoky Mountain. I just wanted to challenge myself to review something I hadn't seen before, if ever. WCW during 1992 was a luxury for me. I got to see it sometimes when I went to my grandparents' house, and we got cable in August of that year. So even then, between Braves baseball and everything else, Saturday night was a guilty pleasure of mine. 92 to 94, when Hogan came in, I started losing interest in the WCW product for a while, but I'm going to try and do as many of these as I can. There's over, at least I know about 150 episodes on various sites, and so I'm going to try and do a review series here. We will be going back to Smoky Mountain and doing a lot of other cool stuff, but new things here. Jim Ross and Jesse Ventura are your commentators for this kind of sit down program. They do a hype for Tom Zink and uh, what later became Stone Cold Steve Austin, but this time Stunning Steve Austin, along with Paul Heyman, his manager. Heyman, of course, would go on to, at this point, he's known as Paulie Dangerously. They talk about the television championship. Austin looks really young and super ready to go here. I must say, WCW 92 probably my favorite heel stable of all time, the Dangerous Alliance. I know there's people that say, "Oh, how could you like the Dangerous Alliance more than the Horsemen?" And the answer is because I saw the Dangerous Alliance in real time. The Horsemen were things I went back to watch, and sometimes you grow fonder of things that are, there when you are kind of growing up, for lack of a better term, than when you have to go back and rewatch them. I love the Horsemen. Don't get me wrong. Technically speaking, probably the best stable in wrestling history, but my partialness to the Dangerous Alliance is mainly because of the proximity to my childhood. They do a highlight package of the Jushin Liger and Flying Brian Pillman match from Super Bowl at that year back in February. And ultimately, when I cover that, that'll be there. There is a light heavyweight championship match up next. Is the first match on this official program. Of course, they run from 92 to 2000 with WCW Saturday Night. The prime years for the show, as I mentioned, for me are 92 through, let's say, summer of 94, but probably the show's gotten stale by about 96 or so. You could probably get another good year out of it if you really wanted to, year and a half. Anyway, Flying Brian and Brad Armstrong for the Light Heavyweight Championship up here. Really good match. Armstrong and Pillman, both baby faces. Pillman working over the arm pretty aggressively, assertively. They do a lot of good chain wrestling. Worth watching if you are a babyface who actually doesn't want to do the flippy floppy stuff. They just do a lot of chain stuff while still doing high risk stuff. Arm breaker into a takedown by Pillman, and then works on the body part. I think you can still do working on body parts even in 2021. Yes, you have to change the moves you would use. Cranking on the arm with an arm wringer probably not it, but you can certainly get more out of arm selling than a lot of guys do these days. Anyway, drop kick under the chin by Pillman, goes back to the arm, stays on the arm. I miss times when guys and ladies would do more selling and actually make things matter. Finally, Armstrong sends his opponent back to the corner. Pillman is overpowered a little bit by Armstrong. Armstrong, a guy who never really got his just desserts, so to speak. Brad, kind of a guy who I think throughout his career was taken for granted as a good hand, and it didn't pay off. There is a tilt-a-whirl head scissors spot that's very well done. Pillman comes off, tries to go for a victory roll, doesn't get everything he wants with it, but does get him over. Near fall there. Victory roll, a move we hardly see anymore. Drop toe hold, and more traditional wrestling over the next several minutes by Pillman. Pillman again in 92 through 94. Obviously, Pillman's still in good enough shape that he doesn't get too tied up. They do battle over a seated abdominal stretch or an abdominal stretch on the mat for the next little while. Irish whips. Out goes Pillman. Pillman managing to go for the attempted, finish, but Armstrong goes back to the arm bar, and that works out pretty well for him actually for the next little while. Drops down. Pillman stays on him for a bit. Match goes nearly 6 or 8 minutes, which is weird because this is I believe, Bill Watts span in time, which I know a lot of people aren't Bill Watts fans. I am a Bill Watts fan for a different reason. He focused on what was in the ring. Nice near fall off a power slam for Armstrong. Armstrong stays competitive the entire match, but not so competitive that he, overshadows Pillman. Pillman, obviously, one of the better talents they had at the time. I wish they'd done more with Pillman, although you do end up seeing that by the end of 92, beginning of 93 with the Hollywood Blondes run. The reality that the Blondes run less than a year and a half is also interesting to me as well. Pillman hits a crossbody off the top rope, and a near fall for on the switch of the crossbody by Armstrong, and then we see Pillman with a spinning wheel kick, and Pillman goes right back to the cover. Love the fact that they're actually trying to win the match rather than get their spots in. You don't see much of that these days. Actually, making moves matter, even if they're high impact or medium impact, and then just making everything matter. Pillman goes to the top. Another top rope maneuver from Brian Pillman. Amazing, because I think people take Pillman for granted. He does the Air Pillman clothesline that Brian Jr. does a lot on Dynamite these days. Gets the victory off that maneuver, and away we go. We then kind of see, more hype for the benefit of the new program. We see some working out and some video footage of Ron Simmons. Simmons, months away from winning the World Championship. They eventually do a sit-down interview with him during this program where he basically says he's ready for Rick Rude, ready for the U.S. title. Simmons talks about racial inequality and how unfortunate that is, but he wants to be a world champion. If he has to go through Rick Rude to do it, or anyone else for that matter, he is going to do just that. Although they're kind of hyping him for the U.S. title that Rude is currently holding. Of course, Rude has been in a predominantly even feud with Ricky Steamboat, which will continue for a few more months, but kind of trying to tease him there. We then go post the Simmons decision to another match. I love the fact that this is a wrestling-based program. What that means is, the stories are told as wrestlers tell them. The interviews are longer form, kind of a sit-down style, which I think is unique at the time. Maybe not the first time it's ever done, certainly not. But for 1992, it was rare to see promotions give this much of a free-flowing talk time to people. And so then we see an interesting tag team. Diamond Dallas Page, Hall of Famer, Cactus Jack, Hall of Famer, up here, facing the Fabulous Freebirds. In this case, Garvin and Hayes are your Freebird combination. That I think they run that 92 to about 94 here, maybe even part of 91. Got to grab my phone here, but we will be back momentarily in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail.
Incoming Keen Chat request.
Obviously, it goes without saying, the Freebirds as a brand are one of the most dynamic teams, groups in wrestling history, although the Garvin add-on doesn't exactly impress a lot of people. Cactus and Page. Page, of course, doesn't really get a major push for several more years. big back, double back body drop, and Michael Hayes. I have said before, if you've never heard my world class review, worth going out of your way to hear those. But if you've never, I love Michael Hayes in the world class run. I think he's terribly underrated. Cactus and Jimmy Garvin pair off. A little bit of an awkward pairing, but it works for what it needs to be. That being said, certainly not a difficult situation there. Cactus, of course, goes right to town on his adversary. Does a backbreaker type maneuver on his adversary here, and a hard right hand from Michael Hayes leads to shots along the way. Jimmy Jam Garvin certainly not willing to take much of a backward step, and nor should he be. But without a doubt, he's in a interestingly good place there. And there's my phone a second time, so I got to run along. But we'll be right back to finish this up right after this.
Incoming Keen.
And Page is certainly clunky in this time in his career, without a doubt. I mean, certainly he does a move where it takes him a good 15 seconds to get up on the top rope, and Cactus Jack at this point is just about at the Beach Blast level. I don't understand quite the nature of having him here in April and in a throwaway tag match. Although it doesn't necessarily seem like episodic television storytelling in WCW is on point. There is a roll through DDT by Michael P.S. Hayes, which falls Hayes and leads to a victory for the Freebirds. Then we go into more talkie-talkie. There is an enhancement match for Rick Rude. Rude, of course, coming into the WCW area in October 91. They also do highlights of the Ninja, which ends up being Medusa Maselli, otherwise known as Lunder Blaze, otherwise known as just Medusa, interfering in the Super Brawl match with Rick Rude and Ricky Steamboat. She eventually gets in Steamboat's face, and Steamboat does eventually strike her. They also do some highlights from a worldwide match with Steamboat and I believe Arn Anderson. Basically, the idea is building Steamboat up as one of the biggest baby faces in the area. Steamboat pulls Paul Heyman up into a defensive, I guess you'd say defensive position. Rude manages to take Steamboat to task after that and hits a rude awakening, brings a steel chair into the ring. Actually, this is the beginning of where Rude hangs Steamboat with a belt, and the Dangerous Alliance continues to be one of the most dangerous, no pun intended, factions in the area. This all kind of builds to the Wrestle War 92, which is one of the better War Games style deals. Steamboat, though, in this highlight clip, actually holding the U.S. Championship above head, kind of indicating that he will get yet another opportunity at that particular deal. U.S. Champion Rick Rude in a squash match along with Paul Heyman, a.k.a. Paulie Dangerously at this time. Rude is one of those really, I wonder if he might not have been in line had he not gotten injured in 1994 for a world title run some point in WCW. I also wonder if he would have stayed during the Attitude Era had he actually been able to wrestle. Probably so. Rude seems like, from everything I've heard from people, the few people I know that have interacted with him, I don't know anyone who worked with him regularly well enough to say this for sure, but he seems like, from the stories I've heard, a guy who was more about putting on decent matches, but providing for his family, and he would have stayed wherever the money was going to be best, which a lot of talents could learn from that life lesson, to say the very least. certainly, a Rick Rude type situation here. Uh, he manages to have this squash match. Rude, of course, as mentioned earlier, is your United States champion. He stays on his opponent pretty aggressively throughout the match. I don't even remember them mentioning the name of the enhancement talent, which WCW is prone to do. Rude manages to hit a couple of punches, but it's more about him getting over. He, takes the guy down, hits the Rude Awakening pretty quickly. To think that Rude's only been with the company for about 6 or 8 months here, about 7 months or so, it's kind of amazing to me that he was so heavily pushed so quickly. But then again, throughout its rather illustrious history of 12 years or so, WCW always had a history of taking WWE talent, WWF talent, and treating them better and as a big deal. We then see some confrontations between Sting and Big Van Vader, matches they have had from previous encounters. Sting taking Vader out in a highlight package, or trying to take him out with a chair. Odd that we're seeing this here. Sting is your WCW champion at the time, and Vader power slams Sting right in the middle of the ring, lays him out pretty aggressively. Of course, at this point, Vader, of course, managed by multi-time, 7 or 8 time NWA Heavyweight Champion, former NWA Heavyweight Champion at this point, Harley Race. Basically, Vader saying he's going to take Sting to Pain Town, and Sting counters with a promo and says he doesn't know why Vader thinks he can teach him about pain, but Sting's going to teach him about pain. Then we go to a review package of the areas of what's going on in WCW, kind of a WCW magazine pro-type package, hosted by later runner of WCW, Eric Bischoff. I actually enjoyed Bischoff as a announcer, and part of that is the WCW review is Steamboat being ground into the steel or the concrete floor. Bischoff is here with that, and they're hyping the WCW magazine, which never got quite over to the level that people think it should have. But anyway, we continue to go with a meaningful directive here. And again, one thing that WCW was doing well at the time to set them apart, I think, was doing 2 out of 3 fall matches. And we've got about 18 minutes left in the program, and they're going to start the television championship match between Austin and the Z-Man, Tom Zink, with 18 minutes to go. Now, seeing a guy go 18 minutes would be a big deal on television. I don't know that even with all the fancy moves, most guys could do that. But Steve Austin, who had been in the business a couple of years by this point, I think he broke in 89, this is 92, so only a few years in. Beautiful robe, by the way, doing a television championship run. Again, the championship matches, at least for WCW Saturday Night, I'm not sure if it was all syndicated programs, were 2 out of 3 falls, which is kind of interesting. I think it differentiates them, and it harkens back to the 50s and 60s, where it was that way in not every territory, but most territories. Championship matches denoted as multi-faceted. And I shall grab my phone yet again. Kind of a busy night around these parts, apparently. And we'll be back to finish this up. But again, the Austin and Z-Man match is really good. If you are attempting to better your career, watching this match, probably a good way to do it. Z-Man almost immediately puts Austin up in a backslide. The match itself is very back and forth. Austin is masterful at the psychology of bringing about victory without real loss of identity. What I mean by that is, he is doing a great deal of selling. Almost, some would say, depending on your perception for champion, overselling. But the old chicken butt heel would apply here. Without a doubt, definitely worth taking a look at the realities of situations as they were. Austin is way ahead of himself. Z-Man, on the other hand, tries to kind of, sort of, get things going in his general direction, working the arm the majority of the match. Lots of psychology. Matter of fact, the match is more psychology than it is spots. But again, 1992, you couldn't get away with having a semi-main event match that was all spots every week. You could do it every few weeks, but the crowds actually expected you to develop your character and tell an actual story where it made it look like you were fighting. And I think that is a lost art in today's wrestling. You either have guys who do so many strikes that it looks ridiculous for someone to get up. Something as simple as the quality of lockup is also notable here. Austin is on the majority of the backward motion for the, I wouldn't say the whole match, but a major majority of the match, certainly. And, it's pretty intense, pretty, I, I don't know that I necessarily call it aggressive, but certainly, the backslide is a quick, almost near fall, and several more attempted near falls. Austin finally takes his man down and uses chokes and back chin locks. They slow the match down, get a lot out of, chin locks and that. Austin a bit more of a brawler, but does show wrestling acumen, gut wrench suplex, among other things, showing that he has both the technical wrestling masterpiece but willingness to cheat. Speaking of cheat, he takes the first fall with the holding of the tights, and we kind of go that way. Z-Man unhappy with that. He's complaining to the referee. Austin is, willing to do just about anything. Austin actually tries to do a double axe handle off the apron to Zinc. That doesn't go exactly the way that he had planned by any stretch of the imagination. They come back into the ring. Austin slowing the match down. The pacing controlled by a heel. Certainly not exactly a surprise in that day and age, but misses an elbow in the corner, drop toe hold, and Zinc cinches up on a hammerlock. It doesn't have to be rocket science. Obviously, the holds would need to change, but they literally get 4 or 5 minutes out of switching hammerlocks on the canvas, and they keep the crowd, small though it may be, a couple hundred people, whatever it is, probably easily less than 1,000, on the edge of their seat with hammerlock switches and every once in a while coming up with a drop kick here or there. Off the ropes, they do the crisscross spot, and, Thez press, and Zinc manages to get the second fall. So, with less than 10 minutes left in the program, we see them go to a third fall. 2 out of 3 falls matches, obviously, if you really want to get someone over strong, beating them in 2 straight falls is probably a good idea, but at the same time, if you want to keep things even and be able to come back with it, obviously having something more competitive a good idea. Zinc manages to just about take Austin's head off with a clothesline in the next little while here, and Zinc, kind of manages, he does the old ring around spot with the double ear clapper and that. It's not, is it perfect? No. Is it something that would appeal to every person on the planet? Probably not. But within the context of the match and also trying to tell stories that don't get you injured because you got to work on a regular basis. And I think that's another thing that today's talent is not so used to. If you're only working a couple days a week, obviously the pandemic has reduced that, but you're not working 7 days a week. If you're lucky, you're working 3. and you don't need to be as protective of your body as though you're working 6 or 7. Anyway, Zinc takes him down with an armbar, back to the hammerlock, actually does an Indian deathlock style maneuver on the wrist of Austin, actually does a back bridge, and they go right up to the almost the TV time limit. Hip toss, Austin kicks off. Lots of action right near the end. Drop kick under the chin by Zinc.